Get on your knees! Now! The words tore through the Chicago rain like a gunshot. Two white officers, soaked and snarling, aimed their weapons at a black woman who hadn't spoken a word. Her name was Captain Maya Jefferson, but they didn't know that yet. The woman they shoved to the ground wasn't a criminal. She was their new commanding officer, sent undercover to clean the rot inside their precinct. The irony was brutal, the moment unforgettable. The very system she'd sworn to reform had just turned its guns on her. Before we go into this shocking story, take a second to tell us where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you believe justice should never depend on skin color. Now, let's begin. Rain hammered Chicago's Gold Coast that night, hard and unrelenting, washing the city in reflections of guilt and forgotten promises. Captain Maya Jefferson gripped the steering wheel of her unmarked SUV, eyes scanning through the downpour as the wipers beat a rhythm against the windshield. She wasn't here by chance. Commissioner Elias Grant had placed her on this mission personally. A quiet directive to infiltrate the notorious 15th District, a precinct drowning in scandal, accused of corruption, brutality, and racial bias. Her cover was simple: blend in, observe, and expose. But Grant's final words before she left echoed like prophecy. Be careful. Maya. Monsters don't like being studied. At 38, Maya carried more scars than she let the mirror see. Her father had been shot dead by Inglewood officers when she was just 12, mistaken for a threat after reaching for his wallet. That moment carved a permanent line in her soul. She'd joined the force not out of admiration, but out of defiance, to prove that justice could wear her face. Tonight. She was deep in the same city that had taken everything from her, hoping to reclaim it one truth at a time. The storm grew heavier as she parked near the Drake Hotel, jotting notes on her pad about patrol routes and response delays. Gold Coast was known for its quiet discrimination, a place where the rich slept soundly while the poor got stopped for breathing the wrong air. Her headlights flickered, and in that instant, two silhouettes emerged through the rain. Squad car, siren flash, officers stepping out with the kind of swagger that came from unchecked power. She knew their type before they spoke. Officer Kyle Donovan, 35, built like a soldier, eyes hollowed by Iraq and whiskey. His partner, Brett Harlan, 32, clean-cut, heir to a wealthy family, and taught from childhood that privilege meant protection. Donovan's voice cracked through the storm. Out of the vehicle! Now! Maya froze. She was parked legally, engine off, badge hidden beneath her coat. Officer, is there a problem? She asked calmly. The question only angered them. Harlan yanked her door open, shouting, Hands where I can see them! Rain poured inside as Donovan drew his Glock halfway, eyes wild. Driving while black in Gold Coast? Big mistake. The words hit like a slap before she could explain. Harlan grabbed her by the wrist, twisting hard, slamming her chest first onto the hood. Her purse fell, spilling her ID, notebook, and a small academy ring. The ring glittered under the streetlight, a symbol of everything she'd earned, and Donovan kicked it aside with disgust. Pain seared her shoulder as his knee pressed into her back. Stay down, trash, he barked. The metal cuffs cut deep into her wrists. Her blouse soaked through, hair plastered against her face. Please, she tried to say. You're making a crack of electricity filled the air as Donovan sparked his taser inches from her skin. Laughing. Say one more word. Every second stretched into eternity. She wasn't just reliving her father's death. She was living it again. In his place. Through her blurred vision. Maya caught sight of their squad car camera. The screen was paused, frozen on an image of a young black teenager being shot 14 times. Footage from a case the department had buried. They were watching their own crime as entertainment. Her stomach turned, She realized then that this wasn't just about power. It was about pride. About men so corrupted they mistook cruelty for strength. A black SUV passed by, its headlights cutting through the rain. Inside was Sergeant Nolan Reed, their supervisor. He slowed, looked out, and saw the scene. For a moment, their eyes met. He hesitated. Maya thought, maybe, just maybe, he'd stop. Instead, he nodded at Donovan. "All good?" he asked. "Suspect subdued?" Donovan lied smoothly. "Good work," Reed said, then drove off into the darkness. Hours later, Maya sat in the holding cell, wrists raw, shoulder bruised, clothes still damp. Across the hall, officers joked about cleaning up Englewood trash and keeping Gold Coast pure. She listened, silent, memorizing every face, every name. A Latinx detainee begged for water. They ignored him. Another shouted for his lawyer. Laughter answered. The system wasn't broken. It was designed this way. At 3 a.m., her phone vibrated under the bench. A message flashed on screen from Commissioner Grant. "Extraction in progress. Code red. Keep evidence." Relief mixed with fury. She'd done her job too well. She'd seen everything firsthand. When they released her, she didn't argue. She simply walked into the cold night, rain mingling with blood along her temple, back at the hotel. Maya stripped down and examined herself in the mirror. Purple bruises bloomed across her neck and arms. A split lip bled slowly down her chin. She lifted her camera and took photos. One by one, every angle, every mark, evidence, not of weakness, of truth. On the desk, her laptop glowed with data she'd been collecting. 250 complaints over 3 years, 80% against Black or Latinx citizens, all filed under resolved. Nothing about tonight would be buried like that. Her daughter's photo sat beside the laptop. Little Zoe, 10 years old, smiling wide, missing a front tooth. Maya brushed her fingers over the frame. "They think fear will stop me," she whispered, voice trembling. "But I've lived with fear my whole life. It only taught me how to fight." Outside, thunder rolled like an omen. Inside, Maya opened a new file, labeling it in bold, Operation Reckoning. The clock struck 4. She knew sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow, she'd face those same men, not as a victim, but as their superior, in 12 hours. They'd stand in uniform, clueless that the woman they'd humiliated in the rain was about to take command of their world. For the first time that night, Maya allowed herself a faint, bitter smile. Justice, she thought, sometimes begins in the mud. The morning after her arrest, the city looked the same. But for Maya Jefferson, everything had changed. Her bruises burned beneath her blazer, each mark a silent reminder of what the system had become. She knew she couldn't reform anything from behind a podium. She had to walk among the wolves. And so, with Commissioner Grant's blessing, she stayed undercover. Her new partner was Officer Lucia Ramirez, 25, sharp-eyed, Latina, carrying her own ghosts. They met in a rundown coffee shop off Halstead, steam rising from cracked mugs as if trying to fill the silence between them. Lucia's first words came in a whisper. "You're really the new captain?" Maya nodded. Lucia's hands trembled. "My brother died in their custody 2 years ago. They said he resisted, but I saw the body. He didn't." Maya looked straight at her. "Then we fight from the inside, together." From that moment, they became a quiet alliance. 2 women bound not by rank, but by grief. Lucia was brilliant with tech, and she'd been quietly archiving evidence for months. Late that night, they sat in Maya's hotel room, the only light coming from the laptop screen. "These are precinct logs," Lucia said, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Seized narcotics, but look, Every few shipments vanish from the inventory. Maya leaned in, jaw tightening. $500,000 worth of fentanyl gone. They're selling it. Donovan and Harlan's names appeared again and again, signed off by Sergeant Reed. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. He's doing it for his daughter, she murmured. Lucia frowned. You sound like you understand him. Maya's reply was quiet. I do. Pain makes monsters of decent men, but it doesn't excuse what they've done. For the next 3 days, they watched, followed, and documented. Donovan spent his nights at O'Malley's bar, drowning in bourbon and war memories. His rage boiled over with every drink. Iraq still alive in his mind, the sand, the blood, the ghosts. Harlan, meanwhile, moved like a man who believed himself untouchable. He wore expensive watches, met men in black SUVs, always left with an envelope. One evening, Maya and Lucia tailed him through Englewood's narrow streets. When he realized he was being followed, his cruiser suddenly accelerated. Tires screeched, splashing through puddles as he tore down an alley. Maya floored the SUV, adrenaline spiking. "Hold on!" Lucia shouted, gripping the dashboard. The chase was chaos, sirens, flashing lights, and the sound of their tires slicing through water. Harlan's car slammed into a hydrant, a geyser exploding into the air. He stumbled out, soaked and furious, but before he could reach for his gun, Maya had him pinned against the hood. "You don't know who you're messing with," he spat. "Oh, I do," she said, snapping cuffs around his wrists. "You're the man who called me trash in the rain." Inside the warehouse behind him, boxes stacked floor to ceiling told the rest of the story. Seized fentanyl, police tags still attached. Lucia filmed everything, but before they could leave, Maya's phone buzzed, a blocked number, a message that froze her blood. "Back off, or your daughter joins your father." Her breath caught. Someone had found Zoe. "We've been compromised," she said. Grabbing Lucia's arm, they raced through the alleys, tires spinning, until she reached her home. The front window was shattered. Glass glittered across the floor like frost. A shadow moved in the kitchen, a man with a silenced pistol. Maya's instincts kicked in. She lunged, the fight brutal and close. The man slammed her into the counter. She drove her elbow into his throat. The gun clattered to the ground. She caught it, aimed steady, and fired a warning shot through the wall. "Who sent you?" she demanded, blood running from his nose. He sneered. "Reed doesn't know. It was Donovan." She let him crawl out, then called Grant. "They're coming after my family," she said. "I'm moving Zoe to your safe house tonight." That evening, while Zoe slept under guard, Maya met journalist Kira Novak in a parking garage downtown. Kira was 40, tough as wire, with the kind of calm born from surviving her own trauma. She'd once been beaten during a protest by the same department. Maya handed her a drive. "This is everything: drug records, body cam footage, and a video of a teenager shot 14 times. Get it out before they bury me." Kira looked her in the eye. "If this airs, the city will burn." Maya's voice didn't waver. "Then maybe it needs to." Meanwhile, Donovan sat in his apartment surrounded by half-empty bottles, watching old war footage on mute. His reflection in the dark screen looked nothing like a hero. He saw sand dunes, gunfire, and bodies that wouldn't stay buried. Every shout in the hallway became an insurgent's cry. He reached for his flask again, whispering, "They don't understand." His hands shook. He didn't know it yet, but the woman he'd humiliated was about to dismantle everything he'd built on lies. At the precinct, tension thickened like fog. Officers whispered about an internal mole. Files were vanishing. Rumors said the new captain would clean house, but no one knew she was already among them. Sergeant Reed, the man torn between duty and his dying child, found himself cornered. Donovan slammed a folder on his desk. "She's digging into the seizures. You need to fix this." Reed rubbed his eyes. My daughter's chemo costs 12 grand a month. I didn't sign up for murder. Donovan's jaw clenched. Then get out of the way. By midnight, Maya and Lucia sat in the car overlooking the skyline. The city lights smeared by rain again. You should have seen them, Lucia said softly. When I joined, I thought wearing this badge meant honor. Now it just means fear. Maya turned to her. Then we'll redefine it, starting tonight. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was breaking. The fear for Zoe, the guilt over Reed's daughter, the haunting echo of her father's last words. Stay calm. Baby girl. She couldn't. Not anymore. When dawn came, the news broke. Kira Novak's article hit every outlet in Chicago. Execution on dash cam, the hidden killings of the 15th District. The footage was undeniable. The city exploded with outrage. Within hours, the hashtag Chicago Reckoning trended nationwide. Maya watched it all from her hotel window as the first sunlight cut through the gray. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply whispered to herself. They wanted war. Now they'll see what justice looks like. The morning air inside the 15th District headquarters carried the heavy stillness that comes before a storm. Officers filled the auditorium, some in crisp dress blues, others half awake and suspicious. They didn't know what this emergency meeting was about, but rumors had already spread. A new captain was coming, someone sent by the commissioner to gut the place. Sergeant Nolan Reed stood near the front, eyes sunken, mind clouded by guilt. His daughter Emily's chemo schedule was taped to the inside of his locker, her smiling photo reminding him why he'd crossed so many lines. Beside him, Officer Brett Harlan checked his phone nervously, scrolling through angry comments on the leaked video that now had over 5 million views. Officer Kyle Donovan sat slouched, his flask barely hidden in his jacket pocket, jaw clenched in denial. He told himself this wasn't his fault, that the woman he'd humiliated in the rain was just another suspect who resisted. But deep down, he felt something foreign creeping in. Shame. Commissioner Elias Grant stepped to the podium, his expression solemn. "Good morning," he said slowly. "Effective immediately. Captain Harrison has retired. This precinct will have new leadership, someone who will restore integrity to the badge." The crowd murmured. Grant paused, scanning the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, your new commanding officer, Captain Maya Jefferson." The doors opened, and silence fell like a stone. Maya entered in full uniform, medals gleaming against her navy jacket, her posture straight, her expression calm but cold. The bruise on her temple was faintly visible under the light. For a long moment, no one moved. Donovan's flask slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Harlan's face turned as pale as his collar. Reed's knees nearly buckled. "No," Donovan whispered, voice trembling. "It can't be her." Maya stepped onto the podium, her heels echoing against the tile. "Officers," she began, her tone steady, deliberate, each word landing like a hammer. "3 nights ago, I was assaulted by members of this precinct while conducting an undercover evaluation. I was profiled, beaten, and humiliated by the same people sworn to protect this city." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced at Donovan and Harlan, whose faces were now locked in panic. "For 3 years," Maya continued, "this district has filed over 250 excessive force complaints, 80% against Black and Latinx citizens. Everyone dismissed, every victim ignored. That ends today." She turned to the large projection screen behind her. The first image appeared, her face covered in bruises, wrists swollen from the cuffs. Gasps rippled through the room. The next slide showed the teenage boy, shot 14 times, his body lying on the pavement as 2 officers laughed off camera. The caption read, "Evidence concealed by the 15th District." Maya's voice grew colder. "You hid this. You called it officer safety. I call it murder." Harlan stood abruptly, his voice cracking. "This is out of context," he shouted. "That footage is classified." Maya met his eyes. "Sit down. Officer Harlan." The command carried the weight of her new authority. He froze, realizing his career was hanging by a thread. Donovan rose next, pointing at her with a trembling hand. "You set us up. You provoked that stop." "I parked my car legally," she cut in. "You drew your gun because I was black in your neighborhood." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Sergeant Reed tried to interject, voice soft. "Captain, please, my daughter. She's dying. I didn't mean for—" Maya's expression softened for just a second. "I know, Sergeant, but stealing drugs to pay for her treatment didn't save her life. It destroyed others." His lips quivered, tears welling as he sank into his chair. Grant stood again, voice grave. "As of this morning, Internal Affairs and the DOJ are opening full investigations. Captain Jefferson will oversee all reforms personally." The officers muttered among themselves, a mix of anger and disbelief. Donovan slammed his fist against the table. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin our lives?" Maya looked straight at him. "You ruined your own when you forgot what this badge means." His breath hitched, for the first time. The man who'd once shouted at her in the rain couldn't find words. Maya signaled to Lucia Ramirez, who stepped forward in her fresh uniform. "Officer Ramirez," Maya said proudly, "has been promoted to community liaison. She'll lead outreach efforts with Englewood residents." Lucia looked around the room, her voice firm. "My brother was killed by one of you. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for change." The room shifted again. Some looked away in shame. Others glared. Donovan muttered under his breath, "Traitor." Outside the auditorium, the news cameras were already waiting. Kira Novak's article had made Captain Jefferson a citywide name overnight. Her headline, "Cop Cover-Up, Execution Video Leaked," was plastered across every major network. Protesters were gathering downtown, chanting for justice. Inside, the tension boiled. After the meeting, Maya walked into her new office, the same one where Harrison had once mocked her for trying too hard. The blinds were half drawn, sunlight cutting stripes across the desk. She placed a flash drive on the table and motioned for Reed to enter. He looked broken, his hands trembling as he sat. "Captain, I'll resign. Just, please don't take Emily's insurance." Maya slid the flash drive toward him. "This contains everything I found. Transactions, logs, names. Sign your statement and leave. It's the only dignity you have left." He signed, tears streaking his face. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "A man will do anything for his child." Maya paused. "So would I. That's why I'm doing this." Minutes later, Donovan burst into her office, eyes bloodshot, breath heavy with liquor. "You don't scare me," he growled. "You think this city cares about your crusade? They'll turn on you the second it hurts their pocket." She didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least I'll sleep knowing I tried." He leaned closer, his voice low and shaking. "You ruined me." She stared back. "No, Kyle, you ruined yourself." For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Not rage, but recognition. He staggered back and left without another word. By nightfall, Lucia rushed into the office with her phone. "Captain, it's happening!" She held up the screen. The leaked footage had hit 1 million views in 3 hours. #Chicago, reckoning was trending nationwide. Maya stood by the window, the city's skyline glowing beyond the rain. Down below, a small group of protesters carried signs that read, "Justice has a name, Maya Jefferson." Commissioner Grant entered quietly, watching her. "You know what this means," he said. "You just declared war on the department." She turned, voice calm. Then let them come. I've been fighting this war my whole life. That night, as she drove home, the city was alive with sirens and flashing lights. She passed the same intersection where she'd been assaulted. The rain had stopped. The puddles reflected the glow of red and blue, two colors that had always meant danger and hope all at once. She pulled over, took a deep breath, and whispered, "It begins." What she didn't know was that the men she'd just exposed weren't done yet, in the shadows of the city. Vengeance was already taking aim, the night the sniper came. Chicago slept beneath a curtain of rain again, as if the sky itself couldn't bear to watch what was about to unfold. Captain Maya Jefferson had just tucked her daughter Zoe into bed at the safe house, her small voice still echoing in Maya's ear. "Promise you'll be home tomorrow, Mommy." Maya smiled weakly, brushing a curl from the child's forehead. "Always, baby, always." But she knew promises were fragile things in her line of work. Outside, thunder rumbled like distant artillery, and the streetlights flickered, one by one, until darkness claimed the block. On the rooftop across from her SUV, a sniper adjusted his scope. Rain pooled in the creases of his gloves as he muttered into his radio. "Target confirmed. Orders?" a voice replied coldly. "Make it look like a robbery." The barrel steadied, the trigger flexed. Then came the flash. The bullet sliced past Maya's temple, grazing skin and shattering glass. She dropped instantly, instincts honed by years of training kicking in. "Down!" she shouted to the agent stationed nearby, her voice cutting through the downpour. Zoe screamed from inside the car. Maya crawled on bleeding elbows toward her, flinging open the back door. "Get down! Baby! Don't move!" Another shot cracked, tearing through the side mirror. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear. Then, from behind, headlights blazed, the unmistakable rumble of Lucia Ramirez's cruiser. Lucia leapt out, shotgun in hand, her uniform soaked and her face set with fury. She fired toward the roof, the blast echoing through the rain. The shooter fled, scrambling across the ledge and disappearing into the storm. By dawn, the scene was cordoned off. FBI tech teams swept the area, collecting shell casings. DOJ agent Lena Torres arrived in person, trench coat dark with water. "They're escalating," she told Maya. "You rattled their system, and now they're trying to erase the evidence the old-fashioned way." Maya pressed a gauze pad to her temple, the wound still oozing. "Then they just confirmed what I already knew. We're close." That same morning, in an abandoned parking garage downtown, Donovan met with a shadowy figure, union boss Victor Lang. "She's out of control," Lang hissed. "Do you know what that woman's done? City council's panicking. If this keeps up, we'll lose half the department." Donovan's voice was gravel. "She's a threat, and threats get handled." Lang leaned closer. "Careful. The cameras are rolling now. You shoot her again. The whole city burns." Donovan glared. "Then we find another way." Meanwhile, Harlan was unraveling. His wife had left with their son, taking refuge at her mother's home in Wisconsin. She'd seen the footage, read the reports. The man she'd once loved now looked like a monster on every news broadcast. He tried calling her, again and again, but each call went straight to voicemail, sitting alone in his dark apartment. He poured himself a drink, then another, until the shaking stopped. He stared at the wall where his son's drawings still hung. For the first time, guilt drowned out pride. Maya, unaware of Harlan's breakdown, convened a closed-door meeting at City Hall. The tension inside was suffocating. The mayor's advisors whispered about protests, lawsuits, and collapsing morale. "Captain Jefferson," the mayor said, his tone sharp, "your crusades cost us 43 lawsuits and a projected loss of $250 million in settlements. Maybe it's time to ease up." Maya stood, bruised but unbowed. "Ease up," she repeated. "On corruption? On murder? We don't get to ease up until mothers stop burying their sons." Silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. The mayor's jaw tightened. "You're making enemies you can't see." Maya met his gaze. "Then I'll keep the lights on." Later that afternoon, as she left the building, Lucia caught up to her. "Captain, you sure you should keep pushing? They're coming for you hard. Even the union's talking strike." Maya adjusted her coat, eyes on the skyline. "Good. Let them strike. Maybe then they'll remember who they swore to serve." That night, Maya's investigation reached a new level. Lucia's forensics traced a financial trail connecting Donovan, Reed, and Lang to the missing fentanyl shipments. It wasn't just petty theft. It was organized trafficking. "The evidence is solid," Lucia said, dropping a file onto Maya's desk. "Transfers to shell companies, fake invoices, even Reed's signature." Maya's chest tightened. She'd wanted to believe Reed could be redeemed. Now it was clear he was in too deep. "He's dying with his daughter's illness," Lucia said softly. "But he's killing others to keep her alive." Maya closed her eyes. "Then we end it before anyone else dies." Hours later, her phone buzzed again, an anonymous number. She answered. A distorted voice spoke. "You think exposing us makes you safe? Look at your window." She turned slowly. Across the street, the sniper's bullet hole still spiderwebbed her glass. The voice chuckled. "Next time, I don't miss." The line went dead. Maya exhaled shakily and called Grant. "We're dealing with a network, not a few dirty cops. Lang's involved, and maybe higher. I need DOJ oversight immediately." Grant's tone was low but firm. "Already in motion. Torres is drafting the order tonight. But Maya, don't go home. They're hunting you." Instead of retreating, Maya went back to the 15th. She walked through the halls, her presence drawing silent stares. Officers who'd mocked her a week ago now stood straighter, their eyes a mix of fear and respect. She paused near the bulletin board, where someone had scrawled across a photo of her, "Traitor to the badge." She tore it down without a word. "They can call me what they want," she muttered, "as long as I make them better." Meanwhile, Harlan sat in the interrogation room, pale and trembling. He'd turned himself in after being cornered during a sting. Maya entered quietly. "Officer Harlan," she said, setting her files on the table. "You have two choices, cooperate or fall with the others." His hands shook. "Reed's the kingpin," he blurted. "He's been moving product through impound for months. Said it was for his daughter." Maya leaned forward. "And you helped him because you thought you'd get a cut?" Tears filled his eyes. "I thought I was saving my family too." She stared at him for a long moment before standing. "Then save what's left of your soul. Testify." By midnight, Harlan was in protective custody. Reed was under surveillance. Donovan had vanished entirely. The city, now buzzing with outrage, demanded justice. Kira Novak's latest podcast episode, "The Blue Wall Cracks," hit 5 million downloads within 24 hours. In it, she replayed the leaked audio of officers joking after a fatal shooting. Protesters flooded Englewood streets, led by community leader Jamal Hayes. "We don't want revenge," he shouted through a megaphone. "We want reform." That same evening, Maya stood before her father's grave, umbrella in hand. Rain softened the earth as she knelt, tracing her fingers over his name. "Dad," she whispered, "you said change comes slow, but it's coming." Her phone buzzed again. Lucia texting a photo. The crowd in Englewood, hundreds strong, holding signs that read, "Justice for all." Maya smiled faintly, tears mixing with rain. Then, as lightning flashed over the city, A single truth struck her harder than the storm itself. This wasn't just about fixing a precinct anymore. It was about saving Chicago's soul. And the closer she came to justice, the more dangerous it became to breathe. The disciplinary hearing was supposed to be routine, but by the time Captain Maya Jefferson entered City Hall that morning, the place looked like a fortress under siege. Protesters filled the steps outside, chanting her name, waving signs that read, "Justice for Englewood and End the Blue Wall." Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and through it all, Maya walked with calm determination, her bruised temple barely visible beneath her short hair. Inside, the council chamber was packed. Rows of uniformed officers, city officials, journalists, and civilians who had lost faith long ago. At the front table sat three men who once ruled the 15th District, Officer Kyle Donovan, Officer Brett Harlan, and Sergeant Nolan Reed. They looked smaller now, stripped of their power, their badges surrendered, their fates hanging in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. The council chair struck the gavel. "We're here today to review the conduct of former officers implicated in corruption, drug trafficking, and excessive force." The words echoed across the chamber. Donovan shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Harlan stared at the floor. Reed gripped the edge of the table, pale and trembling, his hands shaking from exhaustion and guilt. Emily's last hospital bill still sat unpaid in his pocket. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. Maya took her seat opposite them, placing a folder of evidence before her like a sword drawn in daylight. When the chair invited her to speak, her voice was steady, clear, and devastating. For years, the 15th District operated under a culture of silence. Evidence was buried, victims were dismissed, and power was abused. I am here today not just as a captain but as a witness to what happens when we let fear and prejudice replace duty. She clicked the remote, and the screen behind her lit up. The first video rolled. Donovan's patrol cam from the night of her arrest. The footage showed him yelling, shoving her against the hood and calling her trash. The room gasped. Donovan's attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection! This footage was obtained illegally." The chair cut him off. "Sit down. Counselor." Maya pressed on. The next clip was worse. The execution video of the black teenager. 14 shots fired. No justification. Silence followed. Some officers in the audience turned away. Others stared, hollow-eyed. "This," Maya said, her voice breaking for the first time, "is why trust is gone. This is why mothers bury sons who did nothing wrong." Then came the financial logs, transfers, false reports, missing drugs, all signed by Reed, Donovan, and Harlan. $500,000 in fentanyl moved through this department in 12 months, Maya said, her tone flat. And while children overdosed on the streets, officers cashed in. Donovan slammed his fist on the table. "We were soldiers," he shouted. "You don't know what it's like out there. Captain, you've never watched your partner die in an alley." His words cracked into a sob. "I fought in Iraq. I came home to a city that looked just like Fallujah, and no one cared." Maya's gaze softened. "I do care, Kyle, but pain doesn't excuse cruelty. You came home broken, and instead of healing, you passed the pain forward. That's not war. That's cowardice." Reed's voice shook as he spoke next. "Captain, my daughter's dying. I took money because I had no choice." He fumbled with a crumpled photo, holding it up. "She's all I have." Maya's throat tightened. "You had a choice," she said quietly. "We all do. But you let desperation become destruction. And now, other fathers will bury their children because of your choices." The crowd murmured. Harlan, who had sat in silence until then, finally looked up. "I was wrong," he said, voice low. "My father raised me to believe men like me were protectors. I thought being tough made me righteous. But watching that video, I see what I've become." His eyes glistened. "If forgiveness exists, I'll spend the rest of my life earning it." For a moment, the chamber fell still. Even Maya felt the weight of those words. But redemption couldn't come without consequence. The chair turned to the DOJ's agent Lena Torres. "Recommendations?" Torres stood. "Based on evidence and testimony, we request the following. Officer Kyle Donovan, 12 years in federal prison for assault, corruption, and trafficking. Officer Brett Harlan, 5 years probation with mandatory service and counseling. Sergeant Nolan Reed, indictment pending for drug distribution and obstruction of justice." Gasps erupted from the audience. Donovan's head dropped. His attorney whispered something, but he didn't respond. Harlan closed his eyes, tears spilling freely. Reed's face crumpled. He muttered something under his breath, something no one caught, and asked to make one final statement. "I did this for love," he said softly. "But love built on lies kills everything it touches." Then, trembling, he stood, nodded once to Maya, and walked out of the chamber escorted by deputies. Hours later, in his jail cell, he swallowed a handful of pills. The note found beside him was short. "Tell my daughter I tried." Back in the hearing room, chaos broke out when Donovan suddenly lunged from his seat, yanking a pistol from his waistband. "You think you can destroy me?" he screamed. Security scrambled. The crowd ducked for cover. Maya froze as he aimed at her. Lucia Ramirez, seated in the front row, moved without hesitation. She threw herself between them just as the shot rang out. The bullet tore through her shoulder. "Lucia!" Maya screamed, diving forward. She grabbed the gun, twisting it from Donovan's grip as he roared in rage. The officers tackled him, slamming him to the ground. Blood soaked Lucia's sleeve, but she smiled weakly through the pain. "Told you I'd take a bullet for justice," she whispered. The hearing adjourned in chaos. By evening, every news outlet in America was playing the footage, the assault, the confession, the shooting. Protests swelled across Chicago. No longer angry, but unified. For the first time, people chanted not just against the police, but for the officers who stood for change. Donovan was charged within hours, denied bail, and taken to Cook County Jail. Harlan accepted his probation, agreeing to testify against higher-ranking officials. Reed's death hit the force like a gut punch. Even the ones who hated Maya wept that night, when Maya returned to her office. Exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy coat. She looked at the blood stain on her sleeve, Lucia's blood, and felt a deep ache. Kira Novak entered quietly, camera in hand. "You did it," she said softly. "The city's awake." Maya turned to the window where the protest lights flickered below. "No," she said, voice hoarse. "The city's bleeding, but at least now, it knows where the wound is." As midnight fell, she sat alone at her desk, watching the skyline pulse with sirens and candlelight. Justice had come, but it hadn't come clean. 3 men broken, 1 woman wounded, 1 child orphaned, and a city trying to remember what integrity felt like. She picked up her father's old badge, worn and scratched, and whispered, "We're not done yet, Dad. But we're closer." Outside, thunder rolled once more, but this time, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like change. 6 months later, the 15th District no longer smelled of fear. It smelled of fresh paint, new beginnings, and something rare in Chicago policing: hope. The walls once covered in complaint forms and silence now bore murals painted by local kids. Bright colors replacing shadows. Captain Maya Jefferson stood before her officers that morning, her voice steady, her presence commanding but compassionate. "Every uniform in this room represents a promise," she said. "Not power, not privilege, a promise to serve with integrity." They listened, not out of fear, but out of respect. The numbers told the story better than any speech. Civilian complaints had dropped 78%. Community cooperation was up 55%, and arrests were fewer, but smarter. Quality replaced quantity. No more stop-and-frisk quotas. No more bruises justified by procedure. For the first time in decades, Englewood residents invited officers into their homes for coffee instead of bracing for raids. Lucia Ramirez, arm still scarred from the bullet wound, led the district's new bias training program, standing before a room of recruits. She told her story plainly. "My brother died in a precinct like this," she said, her voice strong but trembling. "He begged for help, and they called it resisting. I wear this badge now to make sure no family ever feels that again." The recruits nodded, many of them from the same neighborhoods once patrolled like war zones. Maya made sure 20 new hires came from within Englewood itself, men and women who knew its rhythm, its grief, and its strength. That change alone transformed the district. Suddenly, familiar faces replaced distant enforcers. Trust began to bloom where fear had been rooted for generations, but reform didn't come without backlash. The police union, still bitter over the hearings, staged a protest of its own, accusing Maya of destroying morale. They threatened walkouts, strikes, even lawsuits. Maya faced them head-on. At the next council meeting, she stood before a table of union leaders and played a recording from an officer's hidden body cam. Victor Lang, the former union boss, mocking reforms and taking bribes. The room fell silent. "That," Maya said, "is what destroyed morale, not accountability." Lang was gone the next morning, escorted out of his office in handcuffs. The attempted strike died with him. Outside the department, change spread like fire through dry grass. The DOJ declared Chicago a model of federal compliance under Agent Lena Torres's oversight. Bias training became mandatory citywide. Officers who resisted reform were quietly replaced with those willing to learn. Community programs flourished: Coffee with Cops, Justice Mentorships, and Scholarship Sundays, all backed by Maya's initiative. 400 local teens joined mentorship programs in 6 months, many mentored by the very officers who once feared them. Yet progress never erased pain. Every morning, Maya visited a small photo pinned on her office wall. Sergeant Nolan Reed's daughter, Emily. She'd made sure the little girl's trust fund was secure. A retired officer and his wife were caring for her now. She'll know her father made mistakes, Maya told herself. But she'll also know someone believed she deserved better. Harlan, freed on probation, started volunteering at the Englewood Community Center. He swept floors, handed out food boxes, and spoke to at-risk youth about choices and consequences. Most people ignored him, but some listened. One afternoon, a boy asked if he regretted it. Harlan hesitated. "Every second," he said. "But regret's not enough. You've got to rebuild the things you break." Maya saw him one day, kneeling beside a wall being repainted. She didn't stop him, didn't speak, just watched quietly. Redemption didn't need an audience. Lucia's recovery was slower. She still carried the pain in her shoulder, a reminder of the day she threw herself into a bullet's path. Maya insisted she take time off, but Lucia refused. "I didn't survive to rest," she said with a grin. "I survived to teach." Together, they built a new officer wellness program, mandatory counseling, peer support, trauma therapy. Donovan's downfall had taught them that untreated pain turns to poison. Maya told her command staff, "We can't stop broken men from joining the force, but we can stop the badge from breaking them further." In one of her rare moments of quiet, Maya sat in a therapist's office, something she'd avoided for years. "You never really dealt with your father's death," the therapist said gently. Maya smiled faintly. "I deal with it every day. Every time I stop another family from living it." She didn't cry, She couldn't. She just breathed, long and steady, learning, slowly, to let go of the rage that had fueled her for so long. The city began to notice. Local news called her Chicago's Conscience. Kira Novak's book, The Captain Who Changed the Code, hit the bestseller list, chronicling Maya's rise from a traumatized child to a reformer reshaping a city. National outlets praised her leadership. Invitations poured in, from D.C., from Atlanta, from Los Angeles. She declined most of them. "There's still work to do here," she told Grant one evening. He smiled. "You can't fix the whole world." "Maya," she looked out over the Englewood skyline. "No," she said softly, "but I can fix my part of it." That night, as she left the precinct, she saw two boys playing basketball in the same alley where a shooting had happened a year before. They waved when they saw her. "Hey, Captain J," one shouted. "You fixed our park." She laughed, waving back. "No," she said under her breath. "You did." For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted walking through the streets of Chicago. The ghosts were still there, but now they were quiet, finally at peace. 1 year later, the 15th District stood as a living monument to what courage and persistence could build from ashes. The numbers told one story, but the streets told another. Crime down 18%, 0 brutality complaints in 6 months, and laughter echoing where sirens once dominated the air. Captain Maya Jefferson stood on the front steps of the precinct as sunlight washed across the brick facade. Behind her, murals painted by local youth stretched for half a block, portraits of justice, hope, and the faces of those who never got to see reform take root. She looked at them quietly, her heart full but heavy. Progress had come, but it had cost lives, trust, and a part of her soul she knew she'd never get back. That morning, she visited Cook County Prison to see the man who once called her trash. Kyle Donovan was thinner now, sober, his hair grayer. He sat across from her in the visitor's room, hands folded, eyes steady. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "How's your son?" Donovan swallowed hard. "He won't talk to me," he said. "Can't blame him. I've got 12 years to think about what I did. And it still doesn't feel like enough." She studied him. The same man who once saw her as less than human now seemed hollow, almost fragile. "Redemption doesn't start with forgiveness," she said quietly. "It starts with truth. You faced it. That's more than most." Donovan met her eyes. "You saved this city," he said. "I destroyed it. But if you ever need someone to talk to the new recruits about what hate does to a man, I'll be here." Maya nodded, standing slowly. "Maybe one day," she replied, "when they're ready to listen." As she walked away, Donovan whispered after her, "Thank you, Captain." It wasn't absolution, but it was something like peace. Outside the prison, the air was warm, the first real spring breeze of the year. Maya drove to Englewood Community Center, where a small crowd had gathered for the dedication of a new youth wing. The plaque read, "The Lucia Ramirez Justice Center, built in honor of courage and sacrifice." Lucia stood at the podium, her arm still scarred, her smile radiant. "We didn't get here by fighting violence with violence," she said to the audience. "We got here by refusing to give up on what's right." The crowd applauded, and Maya felt pride swell in her chest. After the ceremony, Lucia hugged her. "You started this," she said softly. Maya shook her head. "No, we did, and we're just getting started." Back at the precinct, Commissioner Elias Grant arrived unannounced, his presence filling the doorway like old sunlight. "You've built a miracle, Maya," he said. walking through the bustling halls where officers laughed and civilians lingered without fear. Complaints are at record lows, morale's higher than it's been in 20 years, and DOJ just called us a model for reform. Maya smiled faintly. Then my work here is done. Grant raised an eyebrow. Done? She nodded. The Central District's collapsing under corruption. They need someone to rebuild it. I'm requesting transfer. Grant sighed, though pride glimmered in his eyes. You really don't stop, do you? Maya looked toward a photo on her desk. Her father, young and proud in his uniform. Not while there's still something left to fix. That evening, she stopped by the park near her old neighborhood. Children played basketball under the newly installed lights. Nearby, Jamal Hayes organized a neighborhood meeting, his voice booming over the mic. This isn't the end of justice, it's the start of community, he declared, and the crowd cheered. Maya sat on a bench watching, a quiet smile spreading across her face. For the first time, she saw her city breathing freely. No sirens, no shouts, no fear, just life. Her daughter Zoe ran up moments later, clutching a flyer. Mom, my school's doing a project about heroes, and I picked you. Maya laughed, scooping her into a hug. I'm no hero, sweetheart, she whispered. I just didn't walk away. Zoe smiled, eyes shining. That's what makes you one. Later that night, Maya returned to her father's grave, the rain from a passing storm leaving the earth fresh and dark. She placed a single white rose on the headstone and knelt beside it. It's been a year, Dad, she murmured. The city's changing, slowly, painfully, but it's changing, and I think you'd be proud. A soft wind brushed her cheek, carrying the faintest echo of peace. She looked up at the skyline, Chicago's towers gleaming like promises kept. The same skyline she'd once viewed with anger now shimmered with quiet grace. In her final report that night, she wrote not about numbers, but about people. Reform is not revenge, she typed. It's repair. It's the slow rebuilding of a city's heart after it's forgotten how to beat. As she closed her laptop, she took one last look at the city lights outside her window. They flickered, red, blue, gold, like the pulse of something alive again. Maya rose, adjusted her jacket, and whispered to herself, Justice rebuilds the broken, but vigilance keeps it alive. With that, she turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, ready to face whatever came next. Outside, Chicago stretched before her, not perfect, but alive, breathing, and healing under her watch. And for the first time since she was 12 years old, Captain Maya Jefferson felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stay safe, stay strong, and stand for what's right.